Good morning, everybody. This is Celeste Carmichael. I am so happy to have you here today on the Building Campus County Connections webinar series. Today's topic is influencing childhood obesity prevention, and actually we'll talk about influencing obesity prevention in general quite a bit. We have here with us Adam Brumberg, who's a research specialist from the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management and the Deputy Director of the Food and Brand Lab. We're really excited to have you here, Adam.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
And Nigel Gannon is also joining us. Nigel is the healthy lifestyle specialist, but a whole lot more than that in the State 4-H office. And so I've asked Nigel to be here to talk a little bit about opportunities for connecting campus and making campus county connections around so we're excited that they're both here to join us. So if you want to do a little bit more of an introduction, that would be great, and then we can get started.
Okay.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, I guess that's the whole point.
Exactly.
My name's Adam Brumberg. I'm the Deputy Director of the Cornell Food and Brand Lab. The Food and Brand Lab is a consumer behavior research center based here on campus. Many of you probably know our work. So we kind of have two main action arms in the Food and Brand Lab. One is the Food and Brand Lab itself, which is where most of the consumer behavior research is done. We also have a school focus center called the Ben Center, which stands for the Cornell Center for Behavioral Economics and Child Nutrition Programs. You may know that better as the Smarter Lunchroom movement. And I know some folks have done some Smarter Lunchroom work, and we've worked with some of the counties around the state helping us to conduct Smarter Lunchroom research. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. In my introduction, I basically told you this part. The Food and Brand Lab has been at Cornell since 2005 when Brian moved from the University of Illinois, and we work with a variety of different kinds of research partners, including NIH, USDA, as well as private industry. We've worked with companies like Bell Brands, which are the guys who make those fun little cheeses, and also we've actually worked with McDonald's and a bunch of other large manufacturers as well. So you can actually apply this not just to food decisions, but basically with food decisions, we all have two different food decision-making systems. One is the deliberative, which is what we like to think we use all the time. That's the rational side where we consider options, we consider what would be optimal, we consider the facts. And we have the emotional system, which is where we kind of just go based on what our favorite preferences are, or how we're feeling at the time, or basically what our habits are. In a nutshell, you can say that the majority of food decisions that people make are based either on convenience or habit. And that's a big deal because our research shows that we make about 200 food-related decisions every day. You may think, if you ask most people, they'd say, how many food decisions do you make a day? And they'd probably say 3, because there are 3 meals in a day. But you're also deciding how much milk to put in your coffee, whether or not to add a sugar, whether or not to get a shot of flavoring when you go to Starbucks, and all those things add up. So, and every single food decision, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, has a calorie cost associated with it. So which decision-making system you use can have a big impact over the long term. And of course, what decision you may make is essentially decided by what sort of cognitive resources you have at any given moment, and that's largely impacted by your stress level. We basically just kind of think of these as a hot or cold state decisions. So in a hot state, we indulge ourselves. We're running late for work. It's already a bad day. We buy a chocolate chip muffin instead of that brand muffin that our doctor told us we should buy.
You're not talking about me, are you?
I was behind you in line this morning. No. We also tend to buy bigger portions when we're in a hot state. Partly that is we're trying to maximize efficiency, because if we say, hey, I'm not going to have a chance to buy something until later, I buy a bigger one now. What happens is we also buy something later, generally speaking.
And can I ask you a question?
Sure, yeah.
So do these hold for youth and adults? Are these patterns that are across our lifespan?
Well, so yes and no. There's a lot of research in cognitive psychology and actual physiology shows that people's brains aren't done developing until they're about 23 or 24 now. So the cognitive load is a lot different on So the cognitive processes are different for adults and kids, but it's still the older a kid is, the closer that point is, the more likely they are to be able to use the rational decision. And actually, that's something we can use to our advantage to drive choices in kids.
So stepping back, it looks like there was a question about what was that question, and it was, does that run our lifespan? Does those effects run our lifespan? So yes.
Okay. I would just love to show this, the one cartoon. Stress is dessert spelled backwards. So that's important to keep in mind. So in terms of kids, since most kids do not have a fully developed rational system, either from experience or actually from physical construction of their brains, but what's good about that is that it's oftentimes you can take advantage of their habits or their need for convenience and speed to drive them in certain directions. Usually there's a helpful option that you can present to a kid that they'll take as a default when they're when they're hurrying on their way to get outside. Particularly in the lunchroom, we find that the number one goal of lunch at schools isn't food, it isn't even getting away from teachers. It's getting to be with your friends. So the quicker they can get through the line, the more likely, the happier they'll be. And we've actually run experiments where we found only contains healthful foods. And things like low-fat milk, low-fat cookie subs, things like that. Kids will gravitate to that because of the fact it's all grab and go setup, and they can just get and go. So I'm just going to run through little things about do we actually know what our own behavior is? Here's a quick poll question for you guys. Let us know. Do you ever eat in front of the TV or the computer?
Okay, and I'm going to open that poll up, if you can just give me 1 second here. And the poll is open, so if you can take a moment to respond, that would be great.
Can't believe my mom sent you that picture for the last slide.
Yeah. Actually, that picture, that kid is David Just, who's one of the other professors that we work with. That's his son, who's crazy for peas, apparently. So while everybody's answering, I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. And this will, unfortunately, prejudice your answer if you already haven't decided to lie about your answer. Because the answer is yes, you all do it. Everybody does it. But if you eat in front of a computer or a TV screen with unlimited quantities of food in front of you, you'll eat about 28% more. Part of the reason for that is that our stomachs run around 20 minutes behind our brains run about 20 minutes behind our stomachs in realizing that we're full. So we can eat enough food to make us full, but it takes about 20 minutes for us to kind of go, oh yeah, I feel full now.
Okay, and I'm just going to share those poll results because, I think it's telling. We're all cooperative extension educators, so chances are that we probably have heard and read this stuff a lot. My answer would have been yes. How many times do I eat lunch in front of my computer screen?
Right. There's a person who answered no there. I would like a screenshot of your desk right now, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us. No, I'm just kidding you. So also with a larger meal, you serve yourself more food based on, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Unfortunately for nutrition educators, we're not always the best at using nutrition information. This particular study, this fat-free study, we gave a group of people fat-free granola, and half of them were told it was fat-free and the other half were told it was regular granola. The fat-free people ate 35% more total volume because they were spending the calorie savings. They were rewarding themselves for doing something good. So we're not the best at that information. This is something we did right here on campus, hide the candy. Out of sight, out of mind is basically what this is. We gave candy dishes to a bunch of admins around campus, and then we secretly went in and refilled them overnight. And there was a direct correlation with number of candies eaten with a distance from the chair. So every 3 feet resulted in about 3 fewer candies eaten over the course of a day. And if you add that up over the course of a week, that can be a significant number of calories. So one kind of the takeaway for that is it's not necessarily the best solution or even necessary to remove or ban something. If you just put it, because that leads people to kind of want stuff more, say if they're told they can't have it. principle called reactance, which is, don't tell me what to do, I'm going to want to do that even more. But if you just put it in an inconvenient place or hide it a little bit, it's still there as an option, but people forget and they don't exercise that option and they're not being told they can't have stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about that bowl size here, and then if you would go ahead and play that video, Celeste.
Okay, so I think I need to pull this back here. Give me a second.
We're very high tech here. On the Food and Brain Lab website, which is foodpsychology.cornell.edu, is pretty much all our videos are available there at one spot or another.
Okay, and they could just Google Food and Brain Lab, right? Cornell Food and Brain Lab, because I do that. So
right, yeah.
That's how I find it.
If you Google Food and Brain Lab, you get the food psychology site comes up.
Okay.
So the reason that this happens is a combination of a couple of things. One is something called the Delboeuf illusion, which is basically the size of something is largely, or our perception of the size of something is largely dependent on the background or the perspective or the contrast. So, for example, those of you familiar with Organic Falls, okay, that's not a good scientific picture, but this is. So the question for you all is, which one looks bigger? You know the answer because I just told you, but if you look at it, the black dot on the right really does look like it's larger than the one on the left. We've redone this all the time. And of course, they're absolutely identical in size. This effect actually carries over into color contrast. We did a similar experiment where we served people red pasta and Alfredo sauce and gave them red plates and white plates. If your foods don't have color contrast, you'll serve more because it's very harder to see the defined edge. It's not as pronounced as an effect as the different size plate, obviously, but it does have a similar impact. So, another trick of the trade is to make sure your plate is a different color than your food.
Excellent. And Delboeuf?
Delboeuf was a French scientist from the 19th century.
Gotcha.
Belgian, actually.
All right.
It could have been. They go back and forth in that part of the world. Just a few more examples of this. We did studies with Cornell students, and ice cream bowls, larger bowls, basically 16 and 8-ounce bowls, 53% more in the larger bowl, and the total overall increase in consumption of 56%. And I'm sorry to tell you, nutrition educators, we've done it to you too. We were at a big nutrition conference a couple years back, and we rigged a buffet. You guys are better than the regular public, but you're still about 25% more than regular people. And we made it worse we gave you big spoons, and you added another 14.5% on top of that. Part of the reason for the spoon and the utensil thing is we have in our minds how many of something is a serving. So if I'm used to serving myself 3 scoops of mashed potatoes, if I have a smaller spoon, I'll still do 3 scoops. And so that's that kind of habit and convenience thing I was talking about. That's the way we can use our non-rational systems to our advantage by gaming it to take advantage of what our habits actually are. Quick poll for you. How many of you are members of the Clean Plate Club, the uniquely American invention about cleaning your plate?
Okay, so I just opened the poll. If you can just take a moment.
Should I go forward?
Sure. Yep, and I think you can still do that. It looks like I can open the poll without passing the ball.
So just to go back to the plate size, every 2 inches increase in plate size is roughly a 31% increase in the amount we serve ourselves because, again, we're trying to fill that white space. We're trying to fill the blank space to the edge of the serving area of the plate. And because of the Clean Plate Club, Americans eat about 92% of what we serve ourselves. Wow. We're waste not, want not is very, very seriously ingrained in the American psyche. And if it goes on our plate, we're very, very likely to eat it. If you ask Americans, when do you know you're full? A very common answer is some variant of when my plate is empty. If you ask Europeans, the most common answer is something similar to when the food doesn't taste good anymore, I know I'm full. So,
and I've shared the results there. You can see them as well there, Adams.
Oh, very good. Interesting. I'm surprised that there's as many no's as there are. Usually when I do that in in a setting, about 75% of the hands are up for yes.
Does it have anything to do with age or generation? Have you found that to be true? We have quite a few younger educators.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that.
Younger than me, anyway.
That's true. Well, so I gave a similar presentation in New York City last week to a group that ranged from early 20s dietetic interns up to people who are unfortunately your and my age. So, they're still it's true that portion control is much more ingrained in people under the age of 35 or 40. But the notion of, say, a clean plate club is still there, and the notion of not wasting food is still there. But the point is, if it's something that you're not able to be on top of, you'll end up eating more things.
I claim to be in a younger age group, but I'd have that same mentality. Finish what's on the plate,
right,
kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, it's actually a byproduct of some of the current thinking around sustainability and being eco-friendly.
Yeah.
You don't want to take So if you take more than you're going to eat, then you should eat. You're likely to eat it because of not the notion of not being wasteful.
Well, there's a related question here, and it's how do we compare with other countries in terms of wasted food after meals?
I don't have a good answer for that. I do know that American portions are significantly larger than other portions around the world, but we do eat a lot more of our food than is standard for other nations. So I'm going to have to duck that question because I don't have real numbers for that.
Okay.
We did this. This cartoon illustrates a study that we actually just recently published. In this circumstance, we gave kids. We had parents pour sugary cereal for children and asked the kids to stop when there was enough in there. And we used 16-ounce and 8-ounce bowls. And kids are also driven by that notion of fullness, they're getting their full portion. So when they had the larger bowls, the stopping point, they requested about 87% more cereal than when they had the smaller bowls. And they said, yeah, that's enough for me with the smaller bowl. So that's just kind of driving the notion that we don't have to give. It's okay to set circumstances up so that people have to go back for seconds. A lot of the time they won't because again that convenience and habit thing is we're a little lazy sometimes, and that can be a good thing if you set it up in a way that you can take advantage of it. Here's just a quick, fun observational study we did. We sent a bunch of people into 7 different Chinese buffets in New York and Pennsylvania. We just had people observe the behavior of people, and we made a rough estimate of their BMIs. Interestingly, the folks who were skinnier had very different behavior than folks who were a little heavier. Folks who were skinnier tended to sit quite a bit further away. They were 3 times more likely to use chopsticks, and they were much more likely to use smaller plates. And it's not up here on the slide. They were a lot more likely to walk around the buffet and scan out and pick out what they were likely to eat, what they wanted to eat. I always tell people if you want to see if you want to figure out how to set up a buffet in a way that's most healthfully optimal, go to one of the all-you-can-eat Chinese buffets and do the exact opposite of what they do. All the high-calorie, high-margin, quick-to-fill-you-up foods are in the front, and if you're looking for that the steak and the lobster and the shrimp that they advertise, it's way in the back, and it'll take you a lot longer to find it and get it. Okay. But the important thing is that when we interviewed folks after we'd done the observations, and they had no idea what their differences in behavior were. That one thing, by the way, I'd mentioned before, the lag time between when you eat and when you actually feel full. Chopsticks help with that because it actually literally takes longer to eat, just like using a smaller spoon or multiple servings of a smaller amount. The reason that the awareness is that this is from another study we published recently on buffets. About 68% of the average plate is comprised of the first 3 items in a buffet line. So if you have a buffet line that has 10 or more items, you're very likely, if you just start at the beginning and work your way through, about 70% is going to be those first 3 items. So you can do one of 2 things. If you're the patron, you do that walk around trick where you go and see what it is you actually want, and then you go back and select it. If you're setting up the buffet to help people eat more healthfully, salad in the first spot, vegetable in the second spot. People will find their main courses, but if they have less room for it, they'll take less. A good example of this that's worked in the school space is with rearrangement of milk coolers. There's been a lot of discussion of whether or not to ban flavored milk from schools. Our personal point of view is that flavored milk has a role in schools. We're talking about, in most cases, about 5 grams of added sugar over what's in regular unflavored milk, so it's not a tremendous amount. But there are a significant number of kids who really won't drink any milk that isn't flavored. Unless they and they also tend to be the kids who are most on the margin from a nutritional point of view. However, if you just rearrange the cooler and make it a little bit harder for them to reach that flavored milk, we've done studies where we've seen a 50% increase in the white milk selected, and that's one of the things we get calls about, because school people from around the country will have seen this on the website, and they'll do it. And it works, and they call and say, we did this crazy thing that you suggested, and it really did work. By contrast, some studies that we've done of analysis of data from schools that have banned flavored milk, we've seen an 11% drop in actual participation, which means that the lunchrooms, which are self-funded, they're not funded directly with local tax dollars. The money that comes in through USDA for reimbursement of the meal or what kids spend is what funds the cafeteria. That's a big deal. If you lose to 11% participation, you actually run the risk of putting your lunch program in danger of existing. So these are basically the tenets of what we could refer to as choice architecture, and all you parents out there have done this. And actually, anybody who's tried to get somebody else to do something for them has employed choice architecture. And the example we often use with parents is we say to our kids, do you want to clean up your room now, or do you want to clean up your room after you go outside and play? The end result, hopefully, is that they clean up their room, but they get to make a choice. The psychology literature is full of proof that when you give people a choice between 2 options, they are significantly happier than when they're just instructed to do something. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The nice thing about choice architecture in a number of environments is it's often inexpensive. It's really just a matter of reorganizing things. In your homes, for example, you can reorganize the refrigerator and the cupboard so that the most helpful things are the simplest, the most visible, and the easiest to reach. That works really well on kids who are running in for a snack on their way out to a kickball game. They'll just grab the first thing and go along in many cases. I like to show this study just because I think it's a really great example of how suggestible they are. We did this in a supermarket where all we did was, and you look at the super high-tech technique that we used here, we took duct tape and we put it on the outside of the cart, and we put a sign that said, the healthful items go in the front. And by healthful items, we meant fruit, we just defined as fruit, vegetable, and lean proteins. That's it. That's all we said. And we pulled people's receipts at the end and kind of scanned what they did. There was a control group and then the people who had the divided carts. And the results were the people with the divided carts spent about $12 more on the healthful items, and the share of basket of the healthful items went up to almost 70%. All of a sudden, there were a lot more, and we know from all other kinds of in-home research that if it's in your house, you're going to eat it. One way or the other. That's why they refer to the Costco effect. If you buy 1,600 bags of peanuts, well, that's 1,600 bags of peanuts you're going to eat this year because they happen to be in your house. The same thing holds true with fresh fruits and vegetables. Obviously, there's an issue of spoilage, but I would argue that you have no opportunity of eating it if it doesn't get in the house in the first place. So if we can up the share of basket, that's a good place to start. So a similar thing, another study that we ran that kind of goes with the notion of how things impact taste is we set up the lab as a restaurant and invited a bunch of people in, told them we were asking them to do some menu evaluation and some overall evaluation of some new concepts we were supposedly trying. And as a thank you, they were each presented with a bottle of wine. and half of the group was given a bottle of wine. Everything was identical about the meal, as identical as we could possibly make it, down to dress of the servers, all the dinner were the same, menus were exactly the same, et cetera, et cetera. But half the group was given, as a thank you, a bottle of wine that was labeled as being from California, and one was given a bottle of wine that was labeled as being from North Dakota. They were, of course, they were both the same wine. They were both the famous, infamous, I should say, $2 Chuck. So it was pretty low quality wine to begin with. Not surprisingly, when we asked people to rate things afterwards, they rated the taste of the wine about 2 points higher. That's not surprising. But what is pretty interesting is that they rated the flavor of the food almost a little more than a point higher when they were served the California wine. They also rated themselves as being fuller. They rated the services as being better. They stayed longer. And most interestingly, when we asked them if they'd like to make a reservation for another time, the California people were over 75% yes. But the North Dakota people were, I believe, under 10% to say yes. So this very simple little notion had this huge halo effect on their enjoyment of the entire evening.
Very interesting.
It works with kids too. We did a study with carrots, which are overwhelmingly the kids' favorite vegetable. Kids under the age of 12, baby carrots, and we gave one group baby carrots, and we gave another group X-ray vision carrots, and that didn't just increase the selection; it doubled the consumption of what was eaten. Kids went from eating. They went to consuming about 90% once they were named X-ray vision carrots because it was kind of fun and appealing. And in a school setting where a school was trying to promote the selection of a bean burrito that they had as a meat alternative, we just worked with them to come up with the name, the Big Bad Bean Burrito, and they actually sold out the first day they had that name on it, which they'd never done before. Just a simple little thing. So a quick poll question for you. When you go for your snack this afternoon, which of these two options will you choose?
Okay, and the poll is open, so if you can take a moment to respond, that would be great.
I know. I'm forcing you in chocolate chip cookies, I know, because all of us, of course, are going to choose a banana later today, but in the context of today's presentation, I'd like you to choose between the two cookie options, if you would.
No, forcing people to eat a cookie doesn't sound like a terrible thing either.
Not the worst thing that's ever happened, no. So this is from a paper we recently published as well. Names, not just descriptive names, but also other kind of pieces of information have a significant halo effect. When we gave people a series of different kinds of foods, including yogurt and cookies and chips, and some were labeled as organic and some were labeled or not. They, of course, were all organic because they have to be the same in order for it to make sense. If you chose the organic cookie, you were likely to be willing to pay up to 25% more for the items that were labeled as organic. However, you probably didn't like it as well. The people's taste perceptions of the organic cookies were lower. However, their perceptions of organic yogurt, in other words, something that already was perceived as healthful, was higher. So how you tag something has a lot to do with what people's preconceived notions of it are. Interestingly, and this has no basis in science whatsoever, when people were asked to estimate the calories of different items that were labeled as organic were they generally thought were lower in fat and lower in calorie, even though they were the identical system. And there's no correlation between organic farming or organic ingredients and the caloric level, or there doesn't need to be. There's a lot of recipes that are that way would be. But anyway, people's perception is that if it's organic, it's going to be just generally healthy. But in the case of cookies, that means it's not going to taste good to them anyway. And these were actual taste tests too. This wasn't a simulation. We gave them the cookies to taste, and when they were labeled as organic, they suffered from a taste perspective.
Interesting.
Another quick poll for you. I hope you're all superhero fans out there. What were the results of our cookie?
It was about 50-50.
50-50? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're a kid, you're very likely to say that Batman eats apple fries, because kids generally, when we did this experiment with a group of kids between the ages of 6 and 12, they generally identified the superhero, the good guy, with eating healthful foods, and the bad guy, the Joker, was more likely to eat French fries. What was interesting about this is that if we then took these kids to lunch and I gave them the option of choosing, if it was within about 20 minutes of asking this question, the kids were about 45% of kids all of a sudden chose apple fries if they'd been primed with the notion that the superhero eats apple fries. The control group, only 10% of the kids selected the apple fries when when there was no suggestion of it being associated with a good hero character or a bad character. And, from a parent's point of view, that's basically, you have this discussion on the way, in the line, not hours before, because the effect completely had disappeared after about 22 minutes, I think was the max that it held over. Then they fell back into, as we were saying before, habit and convenience.
So I don't know if, can you see that? I shared the results of that poll as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if, if adults have so I looked at that question. I looked at that question last night when you sent it to me, and I thought, how do I know what Batman would eat? But in a kid's mind,
right.
Well,
kids know a lot more about,
they do know more about superheroes than I do.
I thought Michael Keaton Batman was eating French fries, whereas George Clooney Batman was eating apple fries. So I was thinking about their figures, etc.
Right. Well, you'll notice that George Clooney only got one Batman movie. So
that's right.
So.
I think he's still working.
Yeah, he's still working. That's true. Yeah. Okay. And it's not just superhero characters. Another experiment we did where we put Elmo stickers on apples. Kids were twice as likely to select apples that had an Elmo sticker on them versus not an Elmo sticker. Because of the notion of attribution, which is the part of when I make a choice, I'm more satisfied. When they make the choice, they eat more of what they select. Just kind of as an aside, I don't know if CCE can make use of this or not, but the Children's Television Workshop, which is the folks that make Sesame Street and own the copyright to all Elmo stuff, recently just said that anybody promoting fruits and vegetables can use any of their characters without licensing agreements.
Oh, wow.
So
that's huge.
If you want to go into, you want to put Elmo stickers anywhere you want, you don't have to worry about anybody coming and yelling at you about it. I think it's for the next 5 years, anything promoting fruits and veg can have free reign of any Sesame Street character to employ.
Very cool.
Great.
So a question came in while we were talking here, and are apple fries actually healthier than French fries?
Apple fries, they're just sliced apples, but they're cut to be the same shape as the French fries and served the same way. And actually, so I had mentioned before that we actually have done work with McDonald's. One of the things that came out of that and some subsequent research is we were actually involved in the reformulating of the Happy Meal, which now has a half-size portion of French fries and has low-fat milk as the default instead of soda. The reason that McDonald's has adopted that and it's been successful for them is that part of our research, we discovered that as soon as the kid opens the toy, interest in most of the foods disappears, and it turns out that kids were eating about half their French fries to begin with. You want to guess who was eating the rest of the fries? Mom and Dad. So it's Mom and Dad who are suffering more than from the change in the Happy Meal than from the kids. Kids are just as satisfied with what they're getting. So again, it's a situation where they're being allowed to keep something that they see as an indulgence, but the Happy Meal now is about 104 calories fewer than it was before. So that's. We can discuss the Happy Meal as a separate item at another time, but in the short term, the kids who were getting them are eating fewer calories than they were previously.
Okay.
And just a quick poll for you here.
Okay, so the poll's opened up. You should be able to see it, and go ahead and respond.
So as I said, we do a fair bit of work in schools, but there are also a number of very large national data sets that collect information about schools, and behavior in and out of schools related to food, the SENDO survey, for example. And one thing that I think is very instructive for a lot of people to know about school lunch is school lunch, generally speaking, is healthier than what most kids bring from home. It tends to be lower in calories. It's much more likely to contain a fruit or a vegetable. And that's especially true now with the change in regulations. And they're a lot less likely to have a snack food. The school lunch participants are exposed to a wider variety of healthful foods than most brown bags. Now, I know I'm speaking to a very specialized community of people at home right now, because people are much more interested in food nutrition and think about it in different ways than the average person. But the average brown bag lunch that comes from home is not as optimal from a health point of view as what's available in schools. And now, this is actually from 2010, the 2010 census. So the vegetarian options in schools are now significantly over 30%, probably closer to 70%. Now that with the new regulations that have gone into effect, all schools are now providing fruits and vegetables, and there is already a reduction of sodium, and sugars are limited. And now, as of this fall, 51% of all grains have to be 51% whole grain in the school. So the health profile of the school lunch is significantly different than it used to be. So and I'm just kind of curious. Go ahead.
I shared the results of it. I don't know if you saw that, or if you want to comment on that. And it made me think that maybe after this poll,
right,
I'll go ahead and ask the next question, which is really about the changes in perception of
right,
school lunches for kids.
Right. So I'm happy to see this poll here too, because what is very common is that people are not really aware of what's going on in school. When we talk to school administrators around the country or cafeteria managers, they frequently are given the calls that they get from parents are often about things that aren't actually happening in the school lunch. They're frequently asked, why are they serving fried foods? Very few schools in the country have fryers anymore, and the majority of them have been gone for almost 10 years. A very common complaint is about pizza. Pizza is now everything that's in the school lunch has to comply to the dietary guidelines. If the school participates in the National School Lunch Program, which over 80% of schools do. So the pizza that's served in schools today is almost certainly whole grain and within a specified calorie range. So overall, the school, it's not the school lunch that I grew up with, that's for sure, in terms of healthfulness. And I know you're saying, did they actually have school when I was growing up? But yes.
All right, so I'm going to close that poll and share the results with you, and then turn this video on. So if you are listening and having a hard time hearing the videos, just make sure your speakers are on your computer.
We mean in schools in your county or in the country. I kind of meant generally. That was my question there. And it is true that waste has gone up as a result of the new guidelines, which basically now say that kids must have a fruit or a vegetable on their tray in order to qualify as a reimbursable meal, which is how the schools get their money from the USDA which runs the cafeteria. It was off of a relatively high base to begin with, which is important to bear in mind. But yes, I would say that, but there has been a resultant increase in consumption as well. I don't have a really good hard number on that yet, but we're collecting data, and actually a number of, I think some folks who are on the call have actually been helping us with that over the last year or so. But yes, there is an increase in consumption. And just to address the last comment that's there regarding the appearance of food, that's something we work with a lot. Some of the things we will have picked up through the presentation today is the presentation has a huge impact on what we expect food to taste like. So that is something that we push very hard with when we're working with the school district to improve presentation. Sometimes it can be just something as simple as the video showed, putting something in a nice bowl will actually change the perception, and making sure that it's not sitting in water and things like that. So yeah, those are very, very important. So I'm running up against the end of my time here, so I'm going to run through a couple of things related to some studies we've done with kids and getting them to increase selection of fruits and vegetables. We'll just kind of catch up with that real quick here.
So that poll is open right now if you want to just take a second to respond.
So one of the first things, and all the moms on the phone know that if you cut fruit up, kids are significantly more likely to eat it. We put a fruit slicer in a middle school in Wayne County, and this for apples. And selection of apples, once they were cut up, went up 30%, and waste decreased to 35%. This is a combination of reasons. One, there was a little bit better portion control based on a whole apple, and also particularly for if you're in middle school and you've got braces, and if you're a girl and you don't want to open your mouth up big enough to bite an apple, which is an issue for a perception issue for girls particularly. You eat more of what you select when it's easier to put in your mouth. One thing we really drive. Yeah, so vegetables are the issue. That's true. The poll is up there. Fruit is sweet. Fruit can be a dessert substitute, and that's one thing we often recommend in a variety of different settings. Is to increase fruit consumption. If you can frame it in a way that it looks like dessert, which in some cases is nothing more than making sure it's displayed with the desserts, you'll get an uptake there. It's harder for vegetables for sure. But here are a couple of things that can help with vegetable consumption with kids. One, drive the choice that we discussed before. When kids are given a choice between carrots and celery, even though they overwhelmingly choose carrots, their consumption goes up to about 90% from just under 70%, just by the action of being able to choose and have some control over what they're eating. The increase of variety or even perceived variety has a real impact on what kids will select, and what they select has an impact on what they eat. We did a study where we gave kids choices between plates that had 3 items and 6 items and a variety of different colors. And if there were more groups of things on the plate, the kids were significantly more likely to select that. And the important thing to bear in mind is if you look at the picture, there aren't 6 items. There are 6 piles of 3 different things. So she's responding to the increase in perceived variety as opposed to the actual increase in variety. It's also important for plating preferences for most kids. Most kids really still don't like their foods touching. So if you're going to make a bunch of different piles, make a nice demarcation there. And if you can mix up the colors, that kind of grabs the eye, and that makes a big difference in which plate the kids are more likely to choose. In contrast, we like things a little simpler. Just give us our 3 main things. Give us our meat, starch, and veg, and we're good. It's also important to make sure you provide viable options. This is a study we ran with a group of kids where we took advantage of that notion that when you have unlimited snacks and you're distracted, you'll eat a lot. So we put kids in a circumstance where we brought them in and asked them to watch some cartoons and gave them an unlimited selection of a couple of different kinds of snacks. One was just vegetables, one was just cheese, one was chips, and one was cheese and vegetables combined. When we combined the cheese and vegetables together, the kids ate 72% fewer calories to achieve the same level of satiety. In other words, they were just as satisfied at 400 plus fewer calories. And it's important to note in this particular study, nobody ran out of food. They could always have gone back to eat more. So they were, in fact, reporting that they were satisfied with that combination. The reason the cheese and vegetable combination worked really well was it gives a variety of textures. So you've got the crunch from the vegetable. In this case, it was pepper sticks, celery, and baby carrots. And the cheese, it was, in fact, the Baby Bell cheese some Laughing Cow cheese too. So you get a mixture of textures and also a creaminess from the small amount of fat that's in the low-fat cheese, and you get much more satisfaction. It also worked with adults too, but not quite as pronounced. One thing that was really successful in this study is that the heavier the kids were, and because we did BMI measurements for everyone, the heavier they were, the more effective it was. So the kids who were in the 85 and plus percentile experienced a much greater drop in overall calories needed for satiety than the kids who were in the normal weight percentiles. And that's really good advice that can be handed out to a lot of different parents. The important notion here, though, is that we're not suggesting that you replace all snacks with just cheese and veg. Just put it in the rotation, because that does two things. One, it gives you an opportunity to give them a snack of much lower calorie, but it also increases their variety of offerings. And once cheese and vegetables make it into their choice set, it's something they're much more likely to choose by themselves, especially if you put it in that special, easy-to-get-to spot in the front of the fridge. And just kind of one last thing, just to kind of go through, we recently did a survey of 500 adults, and we asked them about their experiences related to food as children, and there were some interesting predictors of what the correlation between their experiences as a child and their BMI as adults were very pronounced. And some things that the folks with lower BMI were much more likely to have done than other groups were made meals from scratch with their families. Their parents did talk to them about food and about nutrition and about cooking, much more likely to participate in outdoor activity. That makes perfect sense. They slept well. There's a huge amount of research on the importance of sleep, but if sleeping well as a kid can make you a skinnier adult, that's pretty amazing. And they tended to have a lot of friends, whereas the adults who were higher in BMI, they lived in households where food was a reward or a punishment, which makes we already have a complicated relationship with food as it is. Once it becomes a punishment or reward, it becomes that much more complicated. Their parents were more likely to be heavy, and they drank more soda and juice than water. That's not surprising. But parents also restricted their intake, which is kind of an interesting notion around the idea of reactance and pushback. So the kids the skinny adults who had more control over what they ate were more likely to be skinnier as adults than the kids the people who reported having been restricted into what they could eat as kids. That's not to say you give your kids free rein, but this is about building a series of choices that are more healthful. You can restrict access to certain things without it looking like a restriction on overall intake if you set up the environment in a way that it's much easier to choose the healthful foods. So our big takeaways are, work with your environment. There are things around us that cue all kinds of things that we do, and we're not always aware of them. The really simple everyday things that we always recommend to people is, and this works for kids and for adults, smaller plates, smaller utensils, serve from the counter, so put your fruit and veg on the dining room table, but all your main course stuff should stay over on the stove or the counter. You have to get up for second portions. Pre-portion whenever possible. That's especially good for kids, especially in the grab-and-go snack time in the afternoon. Make as much variety as you possibly can. Remember, you don't always that doesn't actually always mean adding more choices. Sometimes it could be repeating a choice in different locations. And model good behavior yourselves and leverage those heroes you see around you. And the last thing I'd like to do is to thank our cooperative extension around the state. Much of the research that is referencing here regarding the Smarter Lunchroom was done in conjunction with CCE partners, either in terms of working with schools or actually helping us with data collection or helping us to make connections. In particular, Wayne, Onondaga, Erie, Schuyler, Yates, Seneca, Jefferson, and Steuben counties have been especially involved over the last couple of years.
All right. Well,
I haven't left much time, but I'm sorry.
That's okay. This is all very interesting. I'm going to turn it over a little bit to Nigel.
So, Adam, I have a link. It's a little too deep in our Healthy Living web pages, but a link to the Food and Brand Lab, and I'm going to bring that out a little bit so we elevate it. So I think connecting our system and our educators to the resources is pretty easy, but what if we wanted to get a hold of you and pick your brain on some ideas, or are there future partnerships that could happen in the counties, things like that? And on my mind is, geez, what can we do better around CareerX and the cafeteria stuff we were talking about before we started? So just some ideas.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things. One, we do have ongoing research, and one of the challenges we always face is finding environments to work with. I kind of don't want to encourage every county to go out and change their cafeterias because we have a grant from the USDA that we need to fulfill. But we might be looking for partnerships in other parts of the state to work on things. But we always have different projects that are in place that aren't necessarily school-related that we can always talk to folks about. My contact information is up there on the screen right now if people want to shoot me an email. And we're always happy to talk about ways that we can collaborate and help either get our resources out to folks or find other local resources. And actually, we find that we tend to learn more from talking to people in the field than we're able to help them. Sorry about that.
Well, no, I mean that's the beautiful thing about this campus-county partnership that that we have within Cooperative Extension is that it can go both ways. That's exactly what we hope to happen. So,
we've actually used the model that we've been working on here in New York to work with Cooperative Extension in other states as well. My colleague, who's the manager of the Ben Center, is currently in California, where they're doing a statewide initiative for smarter lunchrooms, and that heavily involves state extension in California. And we've used that model in a couple of other states around as well. We are big fans.
Well, I just appreciate this time and that you set this up, Celeste, because we have campus-county connection issues. We also have campus-campus connection issues, and so Adam and I met an hour ago,
and I'm so glad you did.
Right, but these are the types of opportunities, so I appreciate having the time. And if anyone has questions on how you would like to connect with Adam or just my thinking around the healthy living initiatives, please feel free to contact me.
Great. Thank you, Nigel. There's one last question up here if you want to just quickly address that, and it's from Christina Stark. If you pre-portion for kids, then how do they learn to trust their own sense of satiety? Isn't it better to let them learn to serve themselves? And so I think that relates to some of the questions, the things that you were
sharing. The answer that we would give to, hi Christina, how are you? The answer we give I think the answer is you kind of want to do both, right? So pre-portioning for snack stuff, and it also depends on the age, but there are two advantages of pre-portioning. One, in the hot state and in the snacking condition, kids you can drive them to healthier choices in smaller portions. But you can also start to give them a notion of what a reasonable portion is, so that when they do serve themselves, they're more likely to serve a smaller portion. The other side of that is when you do put them in a self-serve circumstance, give them the advantages that we talked about. Let them make sure there are smaller plates, smaller bowls, and smaller serving utensils, so they'll get in the. Because again, a lot of our behavior is based on what our habit and our past history is. So if you have the habit of, if you can build in their minds what a portion looks like. And there's modeling behavior there as well, through pre-portioning or through controlling the kind of utensils they have, then you have a better chance of kind of priming them that. Does that answer you, Christina? I can walk over to your office in a minute if you like.
Thank you both for joining us. Thank you everybody out there for joining us. We have recorded this webinar, so I'll post that by the end of the week. And on your screen right now is a couple of upcoming webinars, one in May on overcoming some STEM youth obstacles, and the June one is TBA. I'm looking at Nigel right now. We'll see how that shakes out, but on youth getting engaged in the environment. If not in June, then certainly up and coming. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Celeste.